Today's episode is brought to you by the Daily Gardener Friday newsletter. You can sign up for the newsletter over at thedailygardener.org. Hi there, and welcome to The Daily Gardener, a podcast about garden history and literature. I'm your host, Jennifer Ebling, and today is May 6th. And before I forget, I want to make sure that you know that this week is Compost Awareness Week, and it's been running all week long, starting the 1st of May, and it will end tomorrow on the 7th. So if you haven't gone outside and checked out your compost pile, or if you're looking to start one this year, tomorrow might be the perfect day to get going with your compost. Now, on a personal note, I just posted information about my student gardener program for this summer in 2022. I work with student gardeners in the Maple Grove area on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays in 2 to 3 hour shifts. And then I work with student gardeners in the Forest Lake area on Mondays and Wednesdays. So if you have a young person who is 14 years or older and they're looking for a flexible summer job, then definitely feel free to reach out. You can contact me at jennifer@thedailygardener.org. All right, let's turn to garden history. It was on this day in 1742 that the Swiss pastor and botanist Jean Senebier was born. Where would we be without Senebier? Well, still breathing, but lacking the knowledge that carbon dioxide is consumed by plants, and in turn, that plants produce oxygen as part of photosynthesis. In a nutshell, Jean Senebier's work was crucial because he learned the function of leaves, capturing carbon for food. Before Senebier, the purpose of leaves and what they did for plants and people was unknown. And it was John Senebier who wrote this fabulous quote, "Observation and experiment are two sisters who help each other." And today we celebrate the French moralist and essayist Joseph Joubert, who was born on this day, May 6th in 1754. Remembered mainly for his Pensées, or thoughts, which were published posthumously, Joseph once wrote, "All gardeners live in beautiful places because they make them so." And today we also celebrate the Austrian neurologist and founder of psychoanalysis, Sigmund Freud, who was born on this day, May 6th in 1856. Sigmund once offered this humorous insight: "Common sense is a rare flower and does not grow in everyone's garden." Very tactful. Well, Sigmund Freud also had a few dispassionate observations about the natural world. He once wrote, "Beauty has no obvious use, nor is there any clear cultural necessity for it. Yet civilization could not do without it." And he also wrote, "Flowers are restful to look at. They have neither emotions nor conflicts." Now, online, there are many photos of Sigmund Freud and his family, especially in the garden of their home in London. The Freuds ended up leaving their home in Austria to escape the Nazis with the help of Princess Mirei Bonaparte, who was also known as Princess George of Greece and Denmark. And in 1938, there was a photo of Sigmund Freud with his daughter Anna and his wife Martha in the garden of Mirei Bonaparte's house in Paris. And this photo was taken just after the family had arrived on the Orient Express from Vienna. Anna looks happy, Martha is looking at a flower, and Sigmund is having a little snooze in his garden bed. And by the way, a garden bed is supposed to be a hot new trend for 2022. But clearly, Sigmund was taking advantage of that almost 100 years ago. Well, the Freud home in London was much nicer and larger than their home in Vienna. And it also had a very large backyard with a garden. And the property is still home to Freud's roses. It's now the Freud Museum at 20 Maresfield Gardens in Hampstead in London, England. And in 2008, the French botanist and biologist, and one of my favorite modern plant scientists, Francis Ali, wrote, Everyone knows that going to the garden does not solve the problems of everyday life. Yet, it relativizes them and makes them more bearable. And then he writes, Sigmund Freud had this late regret. I lost my time. The only important thing in life is gardening. And it was on this day, May 6th in 1925, that the great 20th century reformer of Japanese gardens, at the age of 29, Mirei Shigemori, changed his name from Kazo to Mirei. The name change was a tribute to the 19th century French painter of pastoral landscapes and daily life, Jean-Francois Millet, who once said, "It is the treating of the commonplace with the feeling of the sublime that gives to art its true power." In 1932, Mirei founded the Kyoto Garden Society. Mirei practiced both the art of tea, chado, and the art of flower arranging, ikebana. Mirei once advised, people who try to do research on the garden have to very seriously study the way of tea. Mirei wrote 81 books, including the illustrated book on the history of the Japanese garden in 26 volumes, released in 1938. Mother Nature played an important role in shaping Mirei's life when the Murato typhoon destroyed much of Kyoto in 1934. Many sacred temples, shrines, and gardens were wiped out in the life-altering storm. In response, Mirei took action. He used his own money and became one of the first designers to survey every garden in Japan, creating records for restoration purposes if they were ever damaged or destroyed. The tour provided valuable service to his country of Japan, and it was also a means for Mirei to learn garden design with a special focus on incorporating rocks and stone. As a garden designer, Mirei was entirely self-taught. And throughout his 50-year career, Mirei designed over 200 gardens, including the Checkerboard North Garden or Moss Garden at Tofukaji Temple in Kyoto. That was done in 1939. The Dry Landscape in Zuihoin in 1961. And the garden at the oldest shrine in Kyoto City, the Matsuo Taisha, that he built in 1979. Now, this particular shrine at Matsuo Taisha is dedicated to the gods of water. It's located in western Kyoto, and it was an important place for sake brewing families to worship over the centuries. In 2020, the second edition of landscape architect Kristen Shumi's book, Mirei Shigemori, Rebel in the Garden, was released. In it, Christian breaks down the profound influences and meanings behind Mirei's most iconic gardens. Christian once wrote, Shigemori's body of work is a compelling manifesto for continuous cultural renewal. It's time to grow that garden library with today's book, The Layered Garden by David Culp. This book came out in 2012, and the subtitle is Design Lessons for Year-Round Beauty from Brandywine Cottage. Well, I'm a huge David Culp fan, and I feel like I'm telling you about this book just in time for summer because this book can help you set the stage for how you want your garden to look all year long. And since the summer lays entirely before us, well, this book is just in time for you. If you're planning a new garden or a garden redesign, I tell you what, you could do a lot worse than having David Culp be your guide. Laura Springer Ogden wrote a review that's right on the cover of the book, and it says, garden making in its finest form is a celebration of life and love, and David and this book epitomize this, and I couldn't agree more. And by the way, you'll probably recognize the name of the photographer for David's book as well. It's Rob Cardillo, and he always does such a wonderful job photographing gardens. So the photos in this book are top-notch. Now, David kicks things off in this book with a quote from Francis Bacon. It's from Of Gardens that was written in 1625. It's one of my favorite garden quotes, and it says, "There ought to be gardens for all the months in the year, in which severally things of beauty may be then in season." And of course, this sets the stage for what David is trying to teach us, which is how to have a garden that looks good all year long. Now, I thought what I would do is share this quick little sweet story that David shares in the beginning of his book, because I think it's a great idea if you have young gardeners in your life. It's something that you can do with them if you're going to be planting bulbs for fall, or you can do it with the spring flowering bulbs that you plant in the fall. But this was David's introduction to gardening. He wrote, "One fall when I was about 9 years old, my grandmother Thorpe gave me a bag of bulbs and said, 'You go out and plant them.' I felt more than a little trepidation. I had never planted anything without her supervision, but she reassured me, 'You can do it. You won't go wrong.' Her generosity could have been ruinous to her flower border, but I got the bulbs planted with no mishaps. The next spring, when they bloomed, I almost burst with pride when she told all her friends, 'David did that.' And from that moment, I knew I was a gardener. And after all these years, it remains the core of how I define myself." And I love that story for a couple of different reasons. Number one, it really does tee up what David is talking about here in the layered garden. Because as a gardener, if you dismiss certain categories of plants out of hand, like the flowers that you get with spring bulbs, well, then you'll likely miss one of the layers that can help make your garden beautiful all through the year. Now, the other reason I like this story is for practical purposes. I hear all the time from new gardeners who are so anxious about planting bulbs. And now I'm going to say, hey, if David Culp as a 9-year-old can do it, you can too. And then last but not least, I hope this plants a little seed with all of us that if we are interacting with kids in the garden, we definitely need to introduce them to planting spring flowering bulbs, because the result in the spring is just so impressive and amazing. And it instills that sense of pride that you can get when your garden work goes to plan and you get to experience that first flush of color. So wonderful. Now, all through David's book, he is reinforcing this concept of the layered garden. But I'm going to give you just a little snippet of how he introduces it here, and then he goes into much more detail and offers many more tips. Wonderful little nuggets, little ideas for how to make this look work for you. But here's how he introduces it in his book. Garden layers are made up of a variety of plants, some with complementary or contrasting colors, others with interesting shapes or textures. Layers are more than just perennials or annuals or bulbs or ground covers. They're more than just the ground layer of plants that's the sole focus of many gardens. Beautiful combinations are certainly possible, even in the tiniest scale. Think of dwarf Solomon seal underplanted with moss. That makes a precious 6-inch high picture. But to get the most interest from any garden, all the layers need to be considered, from the ground level to the middle level of shrubs and small trees, up to the canopy trees. Growing plants on vertical surfaces, walls, fences, trellises, arbors, and other supports, even climbing up trees when we can be sure that they will do no harm, adds to the picture by bringing flowers and foliage to eye level and above. So there you go. An introduction to what David is talking about when he says the layered garden. Now, you might be doing some of this just intuitively already in your garden as you look for more ways to garden, looking for different plants or finding and curating different ideas that you can put in your garden. But I think what David adds is his mastery, because he knows how to make all of this work in a very cohesive way that's pleasing to the eye. David's book talks about not only how to do a layered garden, but then how to design it, which is probably the key for most of us because we don't think about that. If we're layering the garden, it can just happen organically. And then sometimes we can end up with a little bit of a disjointed look. And then he also talks about maintaining the layered garden, which is also very, very important. Now, there's two other aspects of this book that I want to share with you. So the first chapter talks about the layered garden, and it walks you all through that. The second chapter introduces you to his garden at Brandywine Cottage. Now, this is important because you basically get a garden tour here, and David gets to show you how he's put this layered garden technique to work right on his own property. And this is not his first at bat at gardening, by the way. This is after he's designed many gardens. So this is really all of his work coming together. It's culminating at Brandywine. And then the last chapter, I think, is actually one of the most important chapters of the book. And these are his signature plants that David advises we consider incorporating into our gardens through the seasons. So this is a great list. This is a list of plants from a garden designer, from a garden lover, someone who works in gardens every single day. So right there, that's an invaluable part of this book. This book is 312 pages of layered gardening, the beauty of the garden at Brandywine, and then some of David's most treasured garden design secrets and his favorite plants. You can get a copy of The Layered Garden by David Culp and support the show using the Amazon link in today's show notes for around $18. Finally, we end the show today with a botanic spark that celebrates the day that Louis XIV of France moved his court to the Palace of Versailles. It happened on this day, May 6th in 1682. Originally, Versailles was built as a country house 9 miles from Paris. Versailles was ideally situated near neighboring forests for hunting. Today, Versailles is known for its opulence, the Hall of Mirrors, stunning art, and lush gardens. The massive gardens at Versailles are the most famous in the world, and the garden is home to over 1,000 statues. And in the Facebook group for the show, I shared a stunning photo of the garden sculptures at Versailles surrounded by sandbags for protection during World War II. It's quite an image. In 2006, Ian Thompson wrote a fantastic book called The Sun King's Garden, Louis XIV, André Lenotte, and the Creation of the Gardens at Versailles. Ian believes that Louis XIV may also have been history's most passionate gardener. Louis, the absolute monarch, was also known as the Sun King, and he specifically designed the central axis to be east-west to track the sun's path across the garden. Louis worked closely for 40 years with the low-born gardener André Lenotte to devise the original design and geometrical layout. Now, temperament-wise, André and Louis could not have been more different. Louis was driven and merciless. André was funny, thoughtful, insightful, and easygoing. Well, fast forward to modern times, and in 1979, Versailles, including the garden, was declared a World Heritage Site. And in 2014, Alla Baraton wrote Gardener of Versailles, My Life in the World's Grandest Garden. Now, as the gardener-in-chief, Alla lives on the grounds at Versailles. He's worked in the gardens, orchards, and fields for over 4 decades. And in case you're wondering, Alla believes that fall is the best time to visit. Now, in his 4 decades at Versailles, Alla has seen a thing or two, and he actually ended up being a witness to the worst natural disaster ever to hit Versailles. On Christmas night through the 26th of December in 1999, a monster winter storm with winds up to 105 miles per hour struck the grounds of Versailles. Alla watched in horror as century trees let go of the earth in response. In a little over an hour, the storm felled 10,000 trees, including 2 tulip trees that were planted by Marie Antoinette in 1783 and a Corsican pine that was planted for Napoleon in 1810. Allah said, "It was like the apocalypse. In 1 hour, 200 years of trees were destroyed." But miraculously, all of the statuary survived unharmed. And there was one account that I read of a tree falling on one of the great statues, and as it hit the ground, the branches parted as if to spare that statue. And it gave me chills just reading that. Quite the story. Well, that's it for today's show. Thanks for listening to The Daily Gardener. I hope you have a wonderful Mother's Day weekend. I hope the weather cooperates and that you get a little bit of time in the garden. And just a reminder that you have a standing invitation to join the free Facebook group for listeners of the show. The next time you're over at Facebook, just search for Daily Gardener Community, where you'd search for a friend and then request to join. And if you'd like more of The Daily Gardener, you can subscribe to the newsletter over at thedailygardener.org. And don't forget that you can also show your support for the show by using the Buy Me a Coffee link over at the website or in today's show notes. This is Jennifer Ebling. Thanks for listening to The Daily Gardener. And remember, for a happy, healthy life, garden every day.